Welcome back to this week's episode of the We Got It podcast. We are super excited for this one. It's been a positive week when it comes to football. We had a really exciting week ourselves, getting some cool opportunities with Spartans Illustrated this week, which, by the way, the We Got It podcast is an official podcast of Spartans Illustrated, which is your home for all things MSU sports. And yeah, really got to have a upfront personal look at really what it is to be a student athlete. I was really humbled by that this week. And so this episode is going to focus on that a little bit more. I'm really excited for our We Got It Covered segment. We have something like a little different, a little special to go over with you today. And I'm hoping that it will kind of become its own segment going forward. So stay tuned on that. And then we will obviously get you all caught up on the Maui Invitational. We're so excited. It looks like the boys are having a great time there. So
how could they not?
Exactly. I mean, it's Hawaii. It's November in Michigan right now. It's pretty nasty outside. So I'm very excited for them and hopeful that we are going to have a good showing there. So lots to cover today. Let's jump right into it.
Welcome to the We Got It podcast,
an MSU sports podcast for everyone.
We're Jonah and Abby,
a husband and wife who's probably a little bit too obsessed with Spartan sports.
And we want to share a little bit of that obsession and joy with you, from casual fans
to die-hard, bleed green fanatics.
And we hope to make following Michigan State athletics more easy, enjoyable, and engaging for everyone.
So go green.
Go white.
Go
state. So Friday night's football game was an interesting one, to say the least. Obviously, the Spartans came away with a 24-17 victory against Purdue, but
it wasn't the prettiest.
It was not the prettiest game. It was really a tale of two very, very, very different halves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we went from converting on 6 of 7 third downs in the first half, which feels like we haven't been able to do that in a while, actually getting some good offense going, getting 24 points on the board, to not converting on a single third down in the second half. Absolutely no more offense went on the board on that second half. And so it really felt like, what happened? What happened in that locker room? Why did these guys not be able to come out and get it done on the offensive side? Thankfully, our defense was able to keep us in the game. They did, pretty well. Jordan Turner came up with an interception that really helped put a stop to Purdue's ever-growing offense in the second half. And so, yeah, it was a weird one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with the first half. And like you said, Michigan State's offense to start was really on fire. They scored on all 4 of their first half drives, 3 of them being touchdowns, and it was really a pretty dynamic half from the offense as a whole. K'Ron Lynch-Adams had a really nice half. Carter, although maybe his yards wasn't crazy, contributed with 2 big touchdowns,
big plays.
20-yard touchdown through the air, a 2-yard rushing touchdown where he had to bounce off a defender, then kind of cut to the sideline. So that, I mean, in trials as well, no turnovers, was getting the ball kind of spread out to his receivers with some deep balls. So really exactly what we were hoping to see from this offense going into this game against probably the worst team in FBS or Power 4 at least.
Yeah.
And in that first half, they were doing exactly what you were hoping for them.
Absolutely. And I think some of that, you can, if you're being more glass half empty, you can say, oh, well, it's against the worst, team in Power 4 and FBS. But at the same time, like, you got to do what you got to do. And I don't think that takes away from the positive things that we had going in the first half. I think, like you said, there was a lot of good different looks. We were moving the ball on the ground. We were moving the ball in the air. Montori Foster had a couple great receptions, one of which for an incredible touchdown. I don't know. He came down with that, really reaching over a defender to pull that in. And so, yeah, I think there was so much positive in the first half, not only on offense, but on defense too. We got our first sack in 2 months,
Yeah.
basically. I mean, so defense was really stepping up as well. Again,
forcing a turnover as well in that first half.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So many positive things. I mean, again, I think you can qualify it as much as you want because it was against Purdue. And there's people who are going to still say, oh, well, we don't have enough talent or we don't have this or that. But
Well,
I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it.
The thing is, like, against a team like that, you just did what you were supposed to do against them. So, of course, it's going to be a positive in that first half. Like, I don't think you need to qualify as being against Purdue.
I totally agree. Yes.
I mean, I would say in the first half, I think the only negative you could take away is the injury to Jack Velling early in that first half, where ended up having to get carted off the field.
She gave a double thumbs up as he's getting carted off the field.
And I know Jonathan Smith had the chance after the game say that he was taken to the hospital, more precautionary, but he was able to watch the game, finishing off. Didn't really give any updates as far as the scope of the injury. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, I wouldn't really expect him back at least next week against Rutgers game, but that was a huge bummer for one of this offense's biggest weapons. And I mean, going into the second half, I could say that probably also a contributor to why there wasn't as much success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you have one of your top, even though we have joked about this before, it seems like most of Aiden Child's interceptions are when he's throwing to Jack Velling. But all that aside, like jokes aside, that he's a huge offensive force. Even if he's not somebody that's necessarily getting receptions or getting yards, like his ability to block, his ability to create space, run routes that open up things for other guys. I mean, he's a veteran out there coming from Oregon State. And so it just, it hurts not having him out there for sure.
Right. And we had an interesting perspective on the game on Friday night. We were in Spartan Stadium, but we were not in our typical seats.
Freezing our booties off. That was not the case.
Right. In the southwest
corner.
Yeah, usually where we are.
Yeah, yep. We were up in the press box, which was a really unique experience. One that I'm like, how did we end up here? But thanks to Spartans Illustrated, that was just a really fun experience. They had a little bit of availability for somebody to go and do some more coverage of the game. And so thankfully, we got to be the lucky one sitting up there. But as you all might know from previous episodes, I am notorious for being the one that is constantly yelling at the TV and constantly vocalizing during games. And so a rule in the press box, because, right, like it's a working environment, there's media from both teams. It is a professional environment. And so there is no cheering allowed, which I thought was going to be extremely challenging. I won't say that it wasn't, but it was a little bit easier than maybe I was thinking it would be. How did you feel about it? You're more stoic watching games in general.
I would agree that it was easier than I thought. I think that it helps because nobody else up there is cheering.
Yes.
So like if we were in a place where other people were cheering, I think it would be hard for me not to cheer as well. But because you're kind of in this environment, and too, like you're inside.
Yes.
So you can still hear the crowd noise. You can still kind of hear the environment, but you also still kind of feel in a way separate from the stadium experience.
Yes, it almost felt like I was just watching it on a massive screen in a way. Like, I don't know, it was just a really interesting experience, but super cool to be able to experience that. Obviously, there's some other, bigger writers from bigger publications, and just unique being in that environment and seeing what it really means to cover sports. We started doing this podcast just for fun for the two of us because so many times Jonah and I are already having these conversations every week, and we were like, what if we just start recording these conversations and putting it out there for more people? So to really kind of be on the real side of journalism was really fun. But I think one of the things that was really cool about it was the opportunity to then go to the press conference after the game. And there were 4 different MSU football players in the press conference who came out kind of in pairs. And then Jonathan Smith obviously came out and made a statement and answered some questions. So what was kind of your experience being in the press conference, being in that room? What did you think?
I mean, that was definitely also a very unique experience apart from being in the press box.
Yeah.
But I think for me, especially in football where you're used to seeing these guys in pads and helmets, not really getting close-ups of them, hearing them talk ever. It was I wouldn't, surreal sounds dramatic, but it just,
I think that's fair,
personalizing
though. Yeah.
these guys a lot and humanizing them. I know when we talked to Will Teeman, that's the one thing he loves to do on his broadcast is be able to humanize these student athletes.
And a big part of what Spartans Illustrated does too, right? Like I think if you go to their bio on any social media, they talk about telling the stories of student athletes, like bringing it back to these are real human beings. Like, yes, we see the stat lines. Yes, we love to yell at our TV. I am guilty of that, I know. But also, like, they're real people, like 18-year-old kids. Some of these, players are behind what we're rooting for. So I think it was just a really good reminder of that.
And I think it was really cool to hear just their perspective on, like we said, it was a tale of two halves. So Michigan State jumped out to a 24-3 lead going into half. And then in that second half, the offense just sputtered. I think they were held to like 61 total yards. Might have been less. It might have been like 46 total yards of offense in that second half. Allowed touchdowns on Purdue's 2 first possessions. Made it really interesting for that fourth quarter kind of back and forth. But it was interesting to kind of hear those players' perspectives on, okay, obviously you ran out to a big lead. Everything seemed to be going right in the first half, and then nothing seemed to be going right in the second half.
At least for offense, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I think Aiden Childs said it well. He's like, yeah, it felt like we came out at halftime and didn't know how to play football anymore. And, I think it's easy for us as fans to feel that way, but it's like, man, the players feel like that sometimes too. And, they were really having a perspective of, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, we didn't want to come out and play like that. But in the moment, you have to treat every single play individually, and you can't let the performance of the previous play impact the next play. And man, I just was really struck by the mental fortitude of those players and their resiliency. I think we've talked about that before, especially with Aiden Childs. I've been really impressed with his ability to, even if he has a big mistake, games where he's throwing 3-4 interceptions, he still is able, I feel like, to come out on the next play and be locked in. And that's just something, that was a theme for all the guys that we're talking. Jordan Turner was out there. Montori Foster Jr. was in the press conference, Aiden Childs, and then
Nakai Martinez.
And they all, I think, talked about that, how they just have to stay focused on the next play. And yeah, just been really impressed with them in that aspect.
Right. I think too, as fans or observers of the game, you can be watching a game too with like the big picture in mind. So thinking about, we're not going to beat Rutgers next week. We're not going to make it to a bowl. Or what does this mean for our program if we can't even beat down Purdue, But for those players, like you said, like they don't have time to think about that. Like you said, they're thinking about that next play and forgetting about the previous play. Like they're just focused in the moment. And I think that helps them. Like, I don't think they're as stressed or as worried about that big picture stuff. Like they'll get there when they'll get there.
Yes. And that is 2 really great points. And I would argue too, not only do they not have the time, but I think Nakai Martinez was talking about, if you are a good football player, not only do you not have the time, you can't. Like you mentally cannot let yourself go there either to dwell on the past or to focus on the future. He said, as soon as you start doing that, like that's when things start falling apart and you miss that execution step. And I think that is a really interesting picture. And I think Jordan Turner said something similar. He said, you can't think about it too big and you can't think about it too small. Like you have to be locked in on, this is what my job is right here in this moment. And like, yes, there's an awareness that we need to get 6 wins in order to have bowl eligibility, to have those extra, 3-4 weeks of practice. But it was, just really interesting hearing it from their perspective.
Right. And the players and really even the coaches don't have like the privilege to be able to have that like long-term perspective on the season. I know like even after the game, like their main focus is not what happened against games maybe they could have won earlier in the season or even how they could have beaten Purdue better. But our main focus is now we have an opportunity to get bowl eligible against Rutgers. And that's the only thing that we're thinking about. We're not thinking about next season or the off season or previous games. Like we're literally just thinking about next Saturday. How can we beat Rutgers and get to that bowl game?
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else that stuck out to you from just your experience in the press box, the game in general, the experience in the press conference? Anything else you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is cool. Like I said, like with the players, you're not used to hearing their voices or hearing their thoughts. It was, I think, felt a little bit more normal hearing Jonathan Smith.
Yes.
Because you're used to hearing him talk, be in front of the camera, being interviewed. But Yeah, I think that was just probably one of the coolest parts for me, is to really humanize some of those players where you might not even know what many of their faces look like because of the sport they're
Yeah,
playing, where
absolutely.
even in
Hidden behind the
basketball,
helmet
you
or
know
the
all the faces of the
yes.
basketball players. But
Yes.
in football, you don't really get the opportunity because there's so many of them.
Unless you're seeing it on like social media or something. But yeah, like all their highlights are them with their helmets and their, mouth guards and
Visors,
eye black and
right.
all the stuff. So yeah. I think I had two things that I think really stuck out to me. And one kind of just goes back to this theme of recognizing that these are 18 to, maybe 25, 26-year-old guys. And just the environment in that press conference, and maybe it was, part of how the second half ended, but it just felt very tense. And it felt like, man, these players are giving us so much as fans, or even thinking about these different journalists. A lot of them are making some sort of living off of covering these student athletes and like how much they sacrifice and give so that all of us can enjoy, and just the amount of kind of pressure that is on them from from a football perspective and wanting to win, but also from a social perspective. And you could really almost tangibly feel it in that press conference. And I know that not all of those people who are covering the sports are necessarily fans or those sorts of things, but it felt like, man, could somebody in here crack a smile? Like I'm in there beaming, just like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And I'm just such a nerd about it. But yeah, it just really gave me that perspective of, man, at times it felt more like an interrogation than an interview. And so just thinking about the pressure that those guys have, and it makes me even more grateful that NIL is a thing now. Like those players absolutely deserve to be making some sort of profit off of who they are and the work that they're putting in. And so it makes me really grateful for that. And then the last thing I will say is that goodness, Jordan Turner, it's just an interview, but I was struck with one. He just seems like just a cool person and just like very down to earth and just like a nice guy. And just the way he carried himself, I was really impressed with. And also, too, I am like 100% confident that if he wanted to, he could eat my liver for breakfast. Like, oh my gosh, he is a man. He is just like I would not ever want to face him on any sort of playing field. I would absolutely get clobbered.
Yeah, he's a specimen for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, I think this is just such an old adage and people get, tease you for saying it. But I'm going to say it, like, a win is a win. We beat Purdue. Yeah. We got the job done. Now the job is to go and beat Rutgers.
Right. And I think, too, as the season is coming to a close, whether or not there's a bowl game or not, like, we'll have some opportunity to talk about the future of this program, where things stand. But at this very moment, like, there's only so much we can talk about, and we're focused on hopefully these guys being able to earn a spot in a bowl game next week, and we'll be supporting them and rooting for them. And the future next season can be worried about another day. It's not our job. I'm sure the coaches are worrying about that right now. But right now, let's just support this team.
Yes.
They give us a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. I know it might not be exactly where we want them to be or where we want this program to be, but we can't control any of that. We can't change any of that. But what we can do is let's show up.
Yep.
Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, 3:30. Show up. I know so many of you are going to be back in Lansing.
Spartan Stadium.
Yep.
Be there. Let's give those guys a good showing. I mean, it's senior night. They don't want to have a half-empty stadium. So show out, support these guys as they have a big win and are playing for an opportunity to, travel somewhere, to have an experience, and to have that additional weeks of prep.
Absolutely. So we had kind of a positive, like, little full circle moment for the podcast this week, because we really are so passionate here at We Got It of incorporating more and more Spartan fans and making Spartan fans of all different experience levels, interests, how many hours they're spending per week. Like, there's no distinction in that here. And we really want everyone to feel welcomed, and we really want people to be involved. And so one of the things that we've been asking for is those of you who tune into the podcast to kind of give us ideas of what do you want covered in in the We Got It Covered segment. And we had somebody reach out to us, I think on Blue Sky
Mm-hmm.
this week, and say, hey, there is a lot of really cool things going on in the whole Spartan athletics world, specifically, the women's cross country team, the women's soccer team, the men's tennis team. Like, there's been so many big wins for MSU sports beyond just basketball and football. And so we really wanted to take time today, especially as we're focused on just highlighting student athletics at MSU in general, just to kind of get caught up on what's been going on in the whole realm of MSU sports. So that's going to be the topic of today's We Got It Covered segment, which is usually a time where Jonah takes me and all of you lovely listeners through some kind of like random or confusing part of a sport that we're covering, but wanted to shake things up a little bit today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think to start, this is a team that we've touched on a few times on episodes in the past, but that's a men's hockey team. They're currently sitting at 9-1 with sweep versus Ohio State, sweep versus Notre Dame,
Jeez.
a split versus, at the time, number 2 Boston College, and Michigan State actually right now, as it stands, sits as the number 2 ranked team in the entire country.
They're crushing it. Okay.
As of this weekend, the number 1 ranked team, Denver, got swept by Arizona State. So there's a legitimate shot by the time that you're listening to this podcast that your Michigan State men's hockey team will be ranked number 1 in the country.
I love it. That's awesome. They're also they didn't have any games this weekend within, NCAA play, but they just came off of a win against the U18 USA developmental hockey team, right? Which a lot of those guys played on prior to coming to MSU. I think there's like 5 or 6 guys that played on that team. So just like a cool experience for them to be able to pour back into the program that helped shape them and also kind of, challenge themselves too in that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Right, and they're coached by Adam Nightingale, who has really just turned this program around in a really short time. Obviously, Michigan State won both the regular season and tournament Big Ten championships last year, was a game away from the Frozen Four, and they're hoping to build off of that success they had last year and continue it this year. And they're hopefully about to be number 1 in the country. So Adam Nightingale has that ship sailing pretty smooth right now.
I love it. Talking about another coach who's really kind of turned things around in a short period of time, the women's soccer team is crushing it this season. They are in the NCAA tournament right now. And actually, at the time that we're recording, they are about to kick off against number 1 Duke in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. So by the time you listen to this, there will be some sort of result for that game. I hope that it's positive. But the coach for the women's team, Jeff Hostler, has led the women's team in the last 4 years that he's been there to 3 NCAA tournament showings. And the MSU women's team has only been to 7 total. So it's really impressive what he's been able to do with this team. MSU is coming off of a huge win against number 4 Texas. In the round of 32, they won in overtime. This awesome putback goal, bounced off the keeper to win it in overtime. So I'm hoping that the momentum from that game, that's a really awesome, gritty win from them, that can carry them through another win against Duke tonight. But we will see.
Other team I want to touch on, and this is the team that the individual who kind of reached out to us mentioned, is the women's cross country team. They've kind of been one of the most dominant teams in this athletic department for a long time now, as their streak for the NCAA tournament or championship is pretty similar to that of Tom Izzo's. As I think they're about 24 straight years that they've qualified for the NCAA championship.
So impressive.
Rachel Forsyth was named a first-team All-American for the Spartans, as they just finished 20th. At the NCAA championships this year, but they've had success for a long, long time and continue to be one of the athletic department's top performing teams.
I have so much respect. I think with any of these things, right? Like we talked about with the football team, getting to be up close and personal with them, you just have so much more respect for what they're doing as student athletes. I feel the same way about track athletes. I had a couple friends in college competing at the Division II level, and just seeing the amount of time and work and effort that goes into doing that. I had someone in my cohort who was on the track and field team, and it just gives you so much respect for what those athletes are doing and also being students at the same time. That's really remarkable.
Yeah, and like that's a good point. Like, I mean, we mentioned the kind of the athletic specimen that Jordan Turner is, and obviously with football and basketball and even hockey, like those are the athletes that get the coverage and the recognition. But like, there are freak athletes all across, not just Michigan State Athletic Department, but all across the country. And I think though that's deserving of being noticed and being seen and recognized for like what they're accomplishing on the field or on the court. But it's really cool just to see how all these teams are doing. But I think there's one more that we want to mention.
One more. So the men's tennis singles player, Barris, he unfortunately just lost in the NCAA championship final. But he came runner-up out of, all of the men's tennis players singles in NCAA Division I. He lost to Columbia's Michael Zhang, so congratulations to him. But really just super impressive showing for Barris in the tournament, and pulled through on the semifinal in a really tough match, and so just really impressive for him to
upset some of the top seeded players in the individual championship bracket. Two of the tiebreakers set in the NCAA championship this afternoon, so really a great showing. And that's another program that's really been turned around the last couple years, where they're not only on the individual level finding success, but on the team level as well, having a lot of success that they really haven't had a whole lot of in their program's history.
Definitely. So many cool things going on in the Spartan athletics world. This is just a small glimpse of some of the things that are going on right now that are relevant. But I hope maybe we caught your interest with something, and maybe you'll follow with a little bit more of those sports than just the traditional basketball, football. Like I said, I know we've started kind of getting into more different athletics in the last year or so.
Right.
Just by like being curious and watching a couple games, and then pretty soon you're hooked and you're like, hey, the men's hockey team's playing again. And so I think it's really fun. There's so many awesome people out there using their talents in so many different ways and going to college classes every day at the same time.
Right.
So I'm just amazed by student athletes for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys have it covered a little bit better on just the general landscape of Michigan State athletics. It's obviously our favorites are football and basketball, but it doesn't just stop there. There's a lot more going on. So show your support, and hopefully you guys feel like you got a better understanding now.
Absolutely. And like I said, we love when people tell us things that they would like covered in this segment. So keep it coming. You can reach out to us at the We Got It podcast at gmail.com. Reach out to us on social media, Instagram, Blue Sky, X, whatever it is. We try to keep up with it.
Since our last episode, we have not had a basketball game that's happened. Sad face.
Sure.
But we are gearing up for one of my favorite events in all of college basketball. That is the Maui Invitational.
Yes. I would agree that it's one of my favorites, partially just for, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this, just getting to see how much fun the players are having in Hawaii. I think part of it is like the wanting to stick it to the man in me of like those people who hate on Tom Izzo of like, he's so hard on his guys, he doesn't let them have any fun. And then they're posting pictures of them like cliff jumping, or maybe not cliff jumping, they're being safe, I promise, but they're like swimming, having a great time in Hawaii. And it just, Tom Izzo's wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and a lei, and he's messing around shooting basketballs. Like, it just shows that there's so much to the culture behind that team. And I think it's just fun to get to see those guys in that element.
Totally. And that's, we talked about on our last episode where Tom Izzo wants his team to experience lots of different kinds of competition, to prepare them for the season. But especially this year, like, Izzo is really wanting to give this team a lot of experiences together. Obviously we talked about the Spain trip that happened over the summer, the exhibition in the Uper Dome up at Northern Michigan, and now this opportunity to go to Maui. And I think, yes, it's fun. Yes, it's a great experience for these players. But I think even from like a team perspective, like
huge bonding experience,
huge time to get chemistry building, to have these shared experiences, because that's just invaluable time.
Absolutely. Because you think too, like those relationships you're building off the court are going to translate on the court. And so being able to have those shared experiences is huge for any relationship, especially teammates.
Right.
And I think speaking of wanting to have good experience, there are some teams in this tournament that will definitely offer opportunities for experience. It's stiff competition. I think 4 or 5 of the teams at the Maui Invitational are in the top 10 right now.
Yeah. So you have number 2, UConn, who's coming off of back-to-back national
Awesome.
championships.
Who we could potentially face in the second round.
Yeah, we could potentially play on Tuesday, depending on the results. But then Iowa State and Auburn, who are ranked 4 and 5, respectively.
Jeez.
And then number 10, North Carolina, is there. But it doesn't really just end there.
Yeah.
You have teams like Memphis, Dayton, Colorado, who have all been in the NCAA tournament recently, have kind of storied history. So a stacked field for Michigan State.
No matter who we're going to face, it's going to be stiff competition, and it's going to be a really good test of, the rotations that we've been putting in, who's going to step up and continue to be that, leading decisive player in these games. It's been looking like it's going to be Jaden Akins. Can he continue that in, a little bit of a higher pressure scenario? I think about, what do people call it in November? You always refer to it as like a mini March Madness.
Feast week.
There we go. That's what I was thinking of. It is more of a tournament. Like, there is a little bit more at stake. You get knocked out of being able to play towards that championship.
You're playing back-to-back days.
So it really is pushing these guys from a fatigue, endurance standpoint, a mental standpoint. And we talked about that a lot with the football team. But to be able to, be able to have a good time, but then adjust and lock in. You're adjusting to a different time zone. I'm sure there's different dynamics between players on different teams too. I think there's things that happen between seasons. Like, we've faced UNC in some tough matchups in the last few years. All those things are at play, and can those guys lock in to be able to, continue to play through those things?
Right. But yeah, I'm really excited about this. Even just watching the other games for this tournament, because it's going to be a lot of very good basketball. It's so fun too. I mean, it's silly, but like in the commercial breaks, as they're just showing Hawaii and the teams doing things in Hawaii, and it's just a fun experience. And even like if your team isn't playing, it's still fun
to watch. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And feast week in general, right? There's basketball pretty much every day of the week, and it's fun. Falls over Thanksgiving. A lot of people have time off and get to tune into basketball. It really does feel like a mini March Madness, which is my favorite season of the year. So
I saw somebody post this week, I think it was on Twitter, they said, if you get sick of your family this week, just know that you can probably turn the TV on. There's going to be some top 25 basketball game on. And so take that advice.
Yes, absolutely. Some of us need it more than others. For sure.
But thinking of a basketball perspective, maybe what are 1 or 2 things you're looking for from this team or maybe individual players going into this week?
Definitely. I mean, I think I already mentioned it, but I really hope to see Jaden Akins continue to step up and be that leader on the court, both from a stat perspective, but just as a voice of calm and centering on the team. I'm really hoping to see Frankie Fiddler finally start knocking down some threes or putting some more points on the board. I mean, he's someone that we really hoped would come in and be a big point impact on the court. And so far, I've been a little bit underwhelmed. I think there's been moments where he's really shined. I think there's a lot of good things that he does defensively on the court, the way that he opens up options. But I've just seen some hesitancy from him and some disorganization that I'm really hoping, maybe having to play 3 days in a row will help him kind of get that under control a little bit.
I think for me, thinking about whether or not if this tournament will be a success for Michigan State, I think kind of the baseline for me, and I don't necessarily know exactly how it has to happen, but if they can get 2 wins out of this weekend, I think that would be, because I think if they get 2 wins, at least one of those is going to be against a pretty solid team, if not 2 solid teams. And
we're guaranteed 3 games regardless, right? So it's, matter of playing for
winner's bracket, loser's bracket. Yeah. So I think I really hope that Michigan State can come out of this weekend with 2 wins. That way they're feeling pretty good about themselves heading into December and conference play starting in a couple weeks. But that's kind of
quickly
the baseline I'm really kind of looking for from this team. I think being obviously Maui is hosted by Chaminade, which is a small, I think, Division II school. So their gym is pretty small. And typically, teams tend to shoot better in smaller gyms.
Interesting.
And that's why you see, like, in the Final Four, and they're playing in these big football stadiums, teams usually struggle because there's so much space and the depth is all off. But in smaller gyms, teams tend to shoot better. So I'm hoping like this can be kind of like a get-right opportunity for Michigan State to see some shots
need it from
fall.
The 3-point line,
so I'm looking out for that as well. I mean,
maybe it's just what Frankie Fiddler needs to get going.
Yeah.
And the whole team.
No, and everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
But this is Michigan State's 5th appearance in this tournament. Their record all time is 8-4. So averaging about 2 wins a tournament. And then they won it back in 1991. So they haven't gotten this championship in a while. So
we're due. We're due for a win. I think we can do it.
Absolutely.
I think it'll be a really good test for sure.
Right. You play Colorado tomorrow at 5:30, I believe, on ESPN2. Colorado's got a brand new coach, breaking in a new roster. So this is the game where you really think Michigan State should be able to get the victory, but it's not going to be a gimme by any means. So they're going to have to be ready to play on Monday night.
Absolutely. If we were to win or lose on Tuesday, when should people expect to see games being played? Obviously, it's being hosted in Hawaii, so game times I feel like are going to be I think odd.
There's 4 games every day. So I think that first slot is like 3:00, and then it goes until like 9:00.
Okay.
So
hopefully for most people in a traditional work day, you're going to at least be able to catch that.
Right. I do believe, though, regardless of win or lose tomorrow, that Tuesday game is like the 5 or the 7. So I think they might be able to escape that early 3:00 game.
For at least the first couple days.
Yep.
I love it. Well, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
I'm really hoping that we can have a good showing at this tournament. And I think at the very least, it's going to be a growing experience for this team.
Absolutely.
For sure. Man, we covered so much today. I hope you feel a little bit more caught up on what's going on in the Spartan athletics world. I hope you had a nice little gentle reminder about these, wonderful student athletes that we love cheering for. Helps give me a little bit more grace when I'm yelling at my television and usually Frankie Fiddler. No, but all jokes aside, just really feel grateful to be part of the Spartan family and just get to continue this podcast. So thank you for all of you who are tuning in. If you have the chance, if you haven't already, we'd love if you could head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, subscribe, leave a comment.
I will say, if you want some more thoughts on the football game from Friday, me and Abby both had the opportunity to publish articles for Spartans Illustrated, just kind of sharing our thoughts on the game. So go over there, check it out. It'd be awesome. But as always,
go green,
go white, go state.